With Lululemon, the real gift happens when they're living in it. When you give them the softest loungewear set, the real gift is this. And this. And this. This holiday, Lululemon makes it easy to give a gift that goes beyond. Open the moment. Shop now at Lululemon.com.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Greetings. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. I am delighted to have you with me today. It's Eric Erickson. The phone number 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, there's a lot of news, particularly the Israel situation, but I actually want to start with what's happening here, non-political, although there are political ramifications, in the state of North Carolina in particular. The Hurricane Helene, it managed to spare us. I had to pre-record my national show on Friday because I needed to do live local on my flagship station, WSB, because of the hurricane. And the power went out, and I was on battery backup and wound up having to repeat part of the show at the end of the show because there was no way for me to finish the show with the battery. And our power was out. Most of the people in my area did not lose power. Our neighborhood did. 15 miles to the east of us was just devastation, and it got worse the further you went. But Florida and Georgia have more experience in dealing with hurricanes than western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee do. And then even into Virginia and the Shenandoah Valley. It's bad. I want to start with one observation, though. You know who's not really in the news right now? Ron DeSantis. DeSantis is not in the news because it's a very boring story. There's not a lot to tell. The devastation in Florida was terrible, but the cleanup process there has been so remarkably straightforward, competent, and quick that Florida has been able to divert resources to go to North Carolina and help in North Carolina. The boring competence of Ron DeSantis is a reminder that leadership matters, and not flashy leadership, but strong competence. What we have on our hands in North Carolina, western North Carolina, is a disaster of biblical proportions. I know people who are currently in their homes on generators with no way to get off their mountaintop homes. They are stuck. They have food to last a little while longer. They're on wells, so they can survive to a degree. If the natural gas stops flowing, their generators go off, and then they're really stuck. One couple I know in particular is hoping a helicopter can rescue them because there's no way to get to them where they live. The roads are gone. One of the things that I talking to a friend of mine about is some of the roads in North Carolina are asphalt, not over like strong foundation, asphalt over dirt. And in the mountains, it's very hard in those narrow passages to build out a strong road foundation. So you put it on what's there, and the mudslides and the rock slides stuff, they're just washing everything away. Bridges are gone. Towns are gone. Houses have been lifted off the mountains by mud and floated down the mountain into the rivers. It is a brutal, brutal situation. And it will be years before everything is back to normal. months before there's a semblance of normalcy, weeks before some people in urban areas get power, far longer for people in rural areas. It is a serious, serious disaster in North Carolina. Virginia and Tennessee are also hard hit, as are parts of Georgia. Augusta, Georgia is brutally hit. My buddy Justin lives in Evans, Georgia, just north of Augusta. He was checking on me on Thursday to make sure the storm was fine. By Friday, his father-in-law lost his truck to a pine tree. They're without power, and probably power will not be on for a week. My son has a friend in Savannah, Georgia. They're not expected to get power back until tomorrow at the earliest. I was supposed to be at an event in Sea Island, Georgia this weekend. It got canceled. That's where the rich people live. And even the rich people, with all their money, can't get the power turned back on their island. But the focus is Western North Carolina. If you can help, if you text the word donate to 33777, I'll send you back a link to the Salvation Army. They have a special fundraising effort for Hurricane Helene to help people in North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Virginia, in particular Western North Carolina, which is hard hit. They're on the ground there. If you text the word donate to 33777, I use the Salvation Army in large part because 99 to 100% of the money you send is going to actually go. There are some major charitable organizations that do not see even 60 cents on the dollar actually go to relief. So much of it goes to overhead. Samaritan's Purse is also a great one. I prefer the Salvation Army, have a long-standing relationship with them. But if you can give. I checked in this morning with my affiliate, WEEB. They're in Southern Pines, North Carolina. They're the center of the state, Raleigh. They were largely unaffected, but I wanted to check on them, make sure they were okay. So I called the station and said, hey, I'm your noon to 3 host. Just want to make sure you guys are okay and don't need anything. And they said they were fine. It's Western North Carolina that's just been savaged by this storm. The pictures are horrific, and the pictures can't really give you justice to the scale. I-40 no longer exists. It was washed off the side of a mountain. Parts of Asheville, North Carolina are just gone. There's a very famous arts district on the southern end of Asheville, North Carolina, along the Broad River. It is underwater. The Biltmore Village is flooded. It is just brutal devastation in that area. The governor of North Carolina, Governor Cooper, says to presume that every road in Western North Carolina is closed. That's what's happening. FEMA needs to step up its game. There are shelters in Western North Carolina that are over capacity of people and running out of food. Now, I can't help but deal with the politics here. Donald Trump is going to Georgia, to South Georgia, Valdosta, Georgia, very hard hit. Their downtown experienced tornadoes. Valdosta State University, trees fell into dormitories. Trump's going to be there. Kamala Harris is avoiding the area. It does make sense from a strategic point, given the devastation in Western North Carolina, for everybody to stay away from there. But in 2005, Democrats pounced on the aftermath of Katrina. They blamed George W. Bush. They blamed FEMA. They blamed his praise for Brownie. Anderson Cooper of CNN was in New Orleans, and he was just aghast at what he saw, and he blasted the federal government. It became a thing. George W. Bush's popularity took a hit from which he never recovered. His reputation for competence gone because of Katrina. Today, Politico's headline is Trump brings Hurricane Helene into 2024 campaign. He dragged Joe Biden and Kamala Harris over their response. He learned from what the Democrats did with Katrina. And by the way, the federal government is not competent. They can't even deliver your mail. God bless my friends who work for FEMA, of whom I have some, but FEMA is going to be overwhelmed by this, and there will be political ramifications for this. But there's something else, too. Your friends and family and your neighbors, this is something I say all the time on here, and this is where the rubber meets the road on this sermon of mine on loving your neighbor. At the end of the day, Washington is not going to provide for you. You seek the welfare of the city in which you live because there you'll find your welfare. In North Carolina, neighbors are having to help neighbors. In Augusta, Georgia, I follow a guy on Instagram. He cooks, he caters, he grills and smokes meat. He made 52 pizzas for his neighbors yesterday. He's got a wood-burning oven. So he and his girlfriend made 52 pizzas and fed all of their neighbors. They had the supplies already. He had a generator for his fridge and freezer. So he cooked for his neighborhood because the neighborhood doesn't have power and they're struggling to get in and out because of down power lines and because of trees still in the aftermath of the storm. In North Carolina, neighbors are going door to door checking on each other. They're carrying messages by foot where need be because the roads are impassable. They're walking to get supplies to bring back for others. Your neighbors matter greatly. Your community matters greatly. Washington, D.C., I struggle to go full politics in disasters like this. It's far easier for people who have no soul to just dive straight into the political ramifications of this. I struggle to do that because there's so much more that's so much more important than politics at these times. But the politicians are ultimately going to fail you. Regardless of what the topic is, even this, they're going to fail you. Your neighbors are the ones who are going to take care of you. Your neighbors are the ones who are going to help you, and you are going to help your neighbors. And your neighbors are local to you. It's not Washington, D.C. It's not to some degree even your state. It's your community around you. It is your city around you, your county. So people got to be invested there. Got to know their neighbor. Your Facebook friend isn't going to come check on you after the hurricane. Your next door neighbor is. There are political ramifications, though. Outside of Asheville, North Carolina, Western North Carolina was heavily Republican in 2020. Donald Trump got over 200,000 vote margin from Joe Biden, only won the state by a very slim margin, and a lot of the margin was padded in Western North Carolina. Are those people even going to be around to vote for him in November? Will they have moved locations? There are political ramifications here. Democrats and Republicans both realize it. If Western North Carolina stays impassable, it could hurt Trump at the same time. If it stays impassable, the politics of it begin to overwhelm the Biden-Harris administration. My personal view is that the people of Western North Carolina are going to be fired up to vote for Donald Trump if FEMA isn't able to live up to a competent reputation. One of the problems as well is the National Weather Service's modeling had the hurricane eye coming right over my house in Middle Georgia, literally right over my house. If you put up the map and you put the addressing in, it was right over my house, the center of the eye. The storm wound up going to the east. The corporate models, the private models, had the storm moving to the east of me. A lot of federal resources were stationed to prepare for it to go up into Tennessee and cause devastation in Tennessee. Those resources were staged for a hurricane passing through Tennessee, not North Carolina, because of the federal weather models. Those resources cannot now get into Western North Carolina because the roads are impassable. So they staged everything to be to the west of the hurricane in Tennessee, and now it's so far west you can't get into Western North Carolina because there are no roads to get there. There will be political ramifications. And the passion, I suspect, if it is standard government incompetence, is going to help Donald Trump. The question is whether or not the voters will be there to actually vote for him. I think the politics of it is rather crass, though. Honestly, I do. Same thing like after a shooting. I don't like to rush into politics. Everybody else does these days. Just the standard ramifications, though, are this. North Carolina has been ravaged by a once-in-a-lifetime storm. The Democrats can scream about climate change however they want. We've had these major storms come through in the past. They've wreaked devastation. This one, very devastating with the rain and the wind, with the mudslides. I won't lecture you, and nor do I wish to be lectured on the politics and the climate change issues. There's just this. Right now, neighbors are having to help neighbors because the government cannot get to you. And people need to be reminded when they look into this tragedy that you and your neighbors are going to do better helping yourselves than waiting for Uncle Sam to do anything for you, because Uncle Sam is kind of clueless when it comes to these things. The Uncle Sam that can't deliver the mail on time can't provide for you at times like this. You have to do it for yourself. It's why the rugged individualism of the people of Western North Carolina matters so much right now. They are survivors, and I hope very many of them survive. As time goes on, we're going to get a more full picture. Right now, however, if you can help, text the word donate to 33777.
Blinds.com Cyber Monday Last Chance is happening now. Don't miss out on up to 45% off site-wide. A Blinds.com design expert can help you make the perfect selection on your schedule. We can handle everything from measure to your whole home installed for one low cost. With over 25 million windows covered, Blinds.com is the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings. Save up to 45% site-wide, plus a free professional measure right now at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425. There are a lot of questions that I have gotten about the biolab that caught fire in Conyers, Georgia. The buddy of mine actually texted me. I was walking into church yesterday, and he texted me. He says, "Is it true that a biolab has caught on fire in Conyers, Georgia?" At the time, I hadn't heard the story. I said, "I don't know. I'll check." So I texted him back and said, "It is Biolab, not a biolab, but Biolab. That's the name of the company. It is not an Ebola manufacturer. It manufactures pool chemicals for spas and hot tubs and pools. And it has had a big fire. And there's a chlorine fog all over North Georgia right now. It's chlorine smelling. I shouldn't say people aren't dying from the breathing it. It just smells slightly chlorine. It was a huge fire. And some of the chemicals at this place, when water touched them, caused explosions. And it was a disaster. A lot of people evacuated. But it was kind of wild to me that I was getting text messages from different people throughout the day. Is there a biolab in Georgia that's on fire? I was like, it's the name of the company. It's not bioweapons. I actually want to talk about this when we come back, because the level of just conspiracy theorizing that's out there right now is kind of wild on both sides. It is not a thing on the right. It's a thing across society right now. Nobody trusts anybody, and into it come the hucksters and the grifters and the frauds, seeding worry, doubt, and dread. And it just, it's driving me crazy out there. So I want to talk about it. But no, there was no bioweapons laboratory in Georgia that caught fire. It was a pool chemical company called Biolabs. That's it. Now, I want to move on because I got to tell you about Hillsdale College. They're such great people, and I would love it if you would go to ericforhillsdale.com, ericforhillsdale.com. You can find out so much more about Hillsdale College. You can get their podcast network. You can get Imprimis completely for free, by the way. You can get their great courses on the Constitution and on citizenship. All you do is go to ericforhillsdale.com, ERICK, ericforhillsdale.com. You'll get a ton of useful information from Hillsdale College. Not only will you get a ton of useful information, but it's free. It's part of their educational mission. It's been part of their educational mission since the 1800s to provide free, useful educational materials for Americans, regardless of who you are. You can get it for free. Their podcasts are fantastic. Imprimis, I've been getting it since I was in law school. Go to ericforhillsdale.com, ERICK, ericforhillsdale.com. Sign up with Hillsdale College today. Begin a great relationship. Improve your mind with Hillsdale College.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
Greetings. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. I am delighted to have you all with me today. Before I get into what I really want to talk about, this is a relevant phone call from Isabel, first responder. Welcome to the show, Isabel. How are you?
Hello, Eric. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. I'm a first responder here in the Atlanta metro area, and I just wanted to comment on the FEMA response that you were talking about up in North Carolina.
Right.
And I'm going to absolutely say massive kudos to all my other first responders up there that are working their asses off to get that situation under control. And honestly, the FEMA people on the ground, from everyone that I've ever worked with, have done a phenomenal job. But it really is an issue of funding, and in having that funding be properly allocated, which I know that's the cry of first responders everywhere, but it really is. And it's been a chronic problem that for about the last 25 years, there has not been adequate funding for the things that we need, whether that be gear to do our daily jobs with or emergency supplies for when we have these mass disasters.
Yeah, I have wondered about that, and so much of it is well being bifurcated between you've got federal authorities and state authorities, let alone the local authorities subservient to the state authorities, not bound by the federal authorities, but then all the federal regulations that come into it. In fact, Isabel, thank you very much for the phone call. There's a story a buddy of mine pointed to give you a sense of when it comes to the funding, the breakdown and all that. Let me find his where was it? It's kind of, yes, here it is. This is my friend Political Math on Twitter. I know him, real person. In 2020, Chattanooga was hit by a devastating tornado. It completely destroyed Grace Baptist Academy. They got $20 million from insurance and began to rebuild, but had to stop when FEMA denied their request for additional funding. They finally were able to appeal the decision in December of 2023, but are still waiting for FEMA to review and approve the claim. Meanwhile, no work has been done to rebuild Grace Baptist in over a year. Then he puts these pictures of pallets that are just being stored and waited. The pallets are rotting where they stand because FEMA's dragging their feet on getting the funding. No one at FEMA seems to care. No one's going to lose their job. Meanwhile, Grace Baptist students who lost their school building in second grade will probably enter high school still without a school, meeting temporarily at a nearby church. It's just wild. It's the bureaucracy just consumes everything. Some of these towns in North Carolina are never going to recover. Just we're seeing FEMA bureaucracy drag its feet in bureaucratic fights. It's sad. Now, that actually is a perfect transition to what I wanted to get to right now. As the government highlights more and more its incompetence, and government's always been incompetent, but we're really seeing more government incompetence after COVID. And I want to review for you just very quickly part of my theory. Part of my theory is if you go back to ancient Rome, the glory of Rome meant everything to everyone. And so the bureaucrats could keep the empire running even as the emperors were killing each other and the armies were fighting. The bureaucrats kept Rome running because it was for the glory of Rome. When Christianity took over, that's when Rome's real decline began. If you read Gibbons in the History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, that the smart people stopped giving their all to the glory of Rome and started giving their all to the glory of the church. And pretty soon the bureaucracy could no longer competently run Rome because all the best bureaucrats were now ministers in the church. In this country, after World War II, a lot of people realized the United States needed to be strong and a force for good in the world, and they moved into government with the aim of building up the United States into being the best hope for civilization and to avoid nuclear holocaust. The heirs of those people saw how those people were so committed to it that they came into power, ensuring the mission of continuing to perpetuate the United States as the last best hope for mankind. This third generation of bureaucrat post-World War II that's taking over things, all they've ever known is the competencies, and they take it for granted. And because they take it for granted, the competencies of government have begun to collapse around us. And into the incompetence that we're seeing now and the inefficiency that we're seeing now, we have a social media that everyone is plugged into, 24-hour news cycles, and people's need to feel relevant and to establish clout. And into that, we have filled the void with a lot of grifters who take advantage of people. There's no difference between those scammers and the scammers who call you and tell you they're calling on behalf of your friend who's stranded in Bombay and please send money to this account number for them. They're waiting and they need your help. We have the same thing with people online, tricking people. Like, for example, I should not have had to say anything. But yesterday, I was compelled to go on social media and point out that the biolab in Conyers, Georgia, that was on fire was not a bioweapons laboratory. I was shocked at the number of people who were circulating tweets online about this biolaboratory. They were calling it a biolab in Conyers, Georgia. Some of them had no idea, but the original people were just flat out malicious in trying to scare people that a bioweapons laboratory in Conyers, Georgia was on fire. And there's nothing truthful about it other than there was a fire. The name of the company is Biolabs. For those of you who have pools, you more likely than not get your pool supplies from this company. They make the pool chemicals for BioGuard, SpaGuard, ProGuard, Spa Essentials, SeaClear, Aquapill, and Natural Chemistry. They're the leader in pool supplies and water testing for pools and spa care. They call themselves Biolab. And their plant burned up. I believe I heard in the newspaper yesterday that it was not the first time there were problems there. And yet the grifters and the hucksters were scaring people that Ebola might be being released into the wild from a biolab, just like in Ukraine, don't you know, in North Carolina and the like. Scaring people about it. That's one of the many delusional lies that circulated from malicious people online. And listen, you got this massive cloud, you got this big fire, you go to social media, here's someone with 1 million followers, and they act like they know what they're talking about. They have footage of the fire, and they're saying, this is terrible. This is a biolab in Conyers, Georgia. We don't know the bacteria and viruses that could be released into the air because of this. Well, you're going to be a little paranoid about it. A friend of mine texted me the other day, and it's kind of funny because it happened to me this morning. I had never seen it before. A friend of mine texted me on Friday with a screenshot of a text she had gotten from a company saying you are $11.43 in deficit in your Peach Pass. That's the toll system in Georgia. Click this link to fill up your account before you get a ticket. And she texted to me, says, is this real? And no, it wasn't real. It was from but it looked legit. It totally looked legit. And they were preying on her fears of possibly getting a big fine for being in arrearage in her toll pass account. Literally the same thing happened to me. In fact, I've got mine right here. I can tell you. So this is what it was. We've noticed an outstanding toll amount of $19.29 on your record. To avoid a late fee of $50, visit this link to settle your balance. Complete scam. But are you sure it's a scam? Maybe you need to click through. It's the same thing that's happening to people on social media who are going for news and they're being misled. Think about the ABC News affidavit. An anonymous account convinced a lot of people on the right that there was a whistleblower who blew the whistle on and filed an affidavit that ABC News had given the answers or the questions to Kamala Harris before the debate. Some of you probably still believe it. It's all now been thoroughly debunked by everyone involved. There was no there, but people for about 72 hours fully bought into the idea that someone had signed an affidavit. Now, if you actually saw the affidavit, you could tell it was very screwed up. There were grammar mistakes, basic spelling mistakes, basic factual issues about the affidavit, but people believed it. People believed it because it rested on their prior beliefs that the media's in the tank for Kamala Harris. They were willing to believe it, and they got scammed. There was also the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift was going to endorse Joe Biden and get engaged at the Super Bowl story. That I know a guy who, when I was scoffing at this and saying, of course it didn't happen, he's like, well, how can you blame people for not believing it? I was like, I can blame people for believing it because it was a stupid rumor fueled by a bunch of idiots on social media that you shouldn't believe. It's like, no, there were credible people who were suggesting it, and it all made sense. You know she's in the tank for Biden. Yes, she's in the tank for the Democrats. She always has been. That doesn't mean she's going to get engaged at the Super Bowl as a big win for them. The whole thing was dumb. But people, once they buy into this stuff, they're hard-pressed to admit they got fooled because then they've got to admit they're foolish. And the Democrats love to point this stuff out about how so many Republicans are just buying into all these crazy conspiracy theories, except it's the Democrats who bought into the Steele dossier. To this day, Democrats are with epistemic certainty convinced Russia stole the election for Donald Trump, and they have to believe it. Otherwise, they have to explain why they were stupid enough to nominate Hillary Clinton in 2016, but it's not true. The Russians did not steal the election for Donald Trump in 2016. Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate with a terrible campaign. It's just the truth. Or what about the Charlottesville stuff? It's been thoroughly debunked, even by liberal fact checkers. Donald Trump did not say there were good people on both sides, meaning the neo-Nazis. What Donald Trump said was that on the debate of whether or not to take down statues of Confederate soldiers, there were good people on both sides. There were those who believed that they were symbols of heritage, not hate, and they shouldn't be taken down. There were people who believed they were hate, not heritage. They should be taken down. There are good people on both sides. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, others have all said, no, this is Donald Trump talking about the neo-Nazis, that they were good people. It's been debunked by Snopes.com, and yet Democrats still want to believe it because they want to believe the worst about their opponents. In the same way, many people on the right want to believe the worst about their opponents, and so many people are now getting sucked in to the grifters and the charlatans who are getting massive followings, who are profiting. You know, the more you circulate their tweets, they get paid by Twitter. So that's what they're doing. They're seeding these things about a bioweapons laboratory in Conyers, Georgia, catching on fire because they know you're going to have questions about it. You're going to either engage with the tweet or retweet it and ask questions about it, and that's going to make them money. Twitter has made lying profitable, and both sides are doing it. Remember the FEMA camps? I know someone who was convinced there were FEMA camps up in North Georgia. And then there's the anti-Semitism. On the left in particular, the rising tide of conspiracies about Israel and the Jews. We have separated ourselves from truth. All that matters for the hucksters, grifters, and frauds is profit. And a lot of people are being taken advantage of, enough to be put into a panic yesterday that a bioweapons lab was burning up in Conyers, Georgia, and everybody was going to die when it was just a company called Biolabs that makes pool chemicals, which is bad enough, the chlorine and the bromine and other things like that. But it wasn't the end of the world. There are just a whole lot of people profiting off you, hoping that you believed it was the end of the world. That's why I like Americans for Prosperity, because they're truth tellers and they're willing to stand up and speak the truth. Even when it's not politically popular, they're willing to tell the truth. And they would love to have you on their side as door knockers, as volunteers, as activists for common sense conservatism. All you have to do is go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. Americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. You go sign up with Americans for Prosperity. They're going to teach you how to be an advocate with your neighbor, going door to door, engaging with your neighbors, trying to get them motivated on common sense conservatism. or go to your local government or state government and express your desires for the advance of families and freedoms in the country. All you have to do, again, go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. You can sign up with AFP. They're the largest and leading grassroots group in the nation. They happen to be on our side, and they fight for common sense conservative reform, from securing the border to advancing school choice. They'd love to have you. They've got chapters in just about every single state now. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Welcome. Eric Erickson here. The phone number 877-973-7425. So my wife and I are dealing with the one casualty of the hurricane at our house, our air conditioning unit. We were already having trouble with it and knowing it was going to need to be replaced. But yeah, after the trees fell, I didn't even realize it was that much of a problem. But yeah, we're going to have to replace our downstairs AC. Those are expensive, by the way. Thankfully, I got some savings. I'm not going to have to put it on a credit card dealing with that stuff. I was really worried about when we discovered that we were having a problem. So it had a coolant leak already, and it's old, so it was going to need to be replaced. And what I discovered from the air conditioning guy, actually, is that because of federal government regulations now, the coolant that is in that air conditioning unit is harder and harder to find because it's been phased out. And even our newer unit, we've got two, one for downstairs, one for upstairs. The newer unit upstairs, that coolant is on the way to being phased out, and it's just becoming more and more expensive to put an air conditioner in your house, even with federal tax credits and stuff like that. It is a tax. Environmentalism is a tax on the poor, basically. Thankfully, I've got the money to afford it, putting in a bigger unit and stuff than what we had. But my goodness gracious, it is a pricey endeavor to get something like that done. And again, this goes back to being a tax on poor people in the middle class. When you can't find coolant for the existing unit, which forces you into an upgrade, which you get some tax credit for, which you got to wait for your taxes to be able to deal with. And for a poor person, that's not going to be enough. I can do it, but lower middle class people who need to swap out their air conditioning unit, it becomes a bigger thing. And of course, the environmentalists, they don't care. They just don't care. They say you got to do it for the environment. Who cares about you? And that's why people are turning their backs on the environmentalist movement. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. If you're buying a building or need a heavy equipment loan or buying a franchise, deals like that. You need $250,000 or more, First Liberty might be able to help you. They make their own lending decisions. Go to firstlibertyga.com, firstlibertyga.com, and you can get all their contact info. Spend 10 minutes with them. See if you're a fit for them. See if they're a fit for you. Need we discuss the Alabama-Georgia game? Probably not. I'm just going to say this. A buddy of mine sent me a picture this morning. Someone has already made buttons of Donald Trump with the Alabama A, and the quote is, "They're eating the dogs," spelled D-A-W-G-S. They're eating the dogs. Okay. Someone very quick-witted. I'm kind of disappointed I didn't come up with that myself. They're eating the dogs with a picture of Donald Trump and the Alabama A on it. My goodness gracious. When we come back, I'm sorry, Abby, that I brought that up if you're listening. When we come back, Hezbollah decapitated by Israel. It's a good thing and a good day.